No doubt, each and every one of you has heard the rumors, and unfortunately I am here to confirm them. That is right, everybody. I did it. Nixxiom is once again bald. So I finally hit level 90, gentlemen, in World of Warcraft Midnight, and ever since I made my first impressions video, after I had finished Quel'The Lost or Eversong Woods, whatever, you guys have been asking me to do a sequel once I hit max level on what I thought of the story and the characters and so on and so forth of Midnight. I will make a separate video down the road of me talking about endgame and whatnot, which I'm already dabbling in, but we'll save that for another day. For now, though, I would like to share with you all my thoughts on all these zones that came out with the new expansion and I guess everything that I and you guys got to experience, both the good and the bad. Now, Eversong Woods, you know, my first impressions video, I pretty much shared with you all my thoughts on Quel'The Lost. All right, I talked about that. I talked about Editor's journey. But if you want like a short, you know, kind of snack-sized version of that, you know, I really enjoyed it. You know, questing in Quel'The Lost again was awesome. I did find the relationship that Editor had with the light, that whole conflict was a little bit strange. I think the philosophy behind it was a little bit off, but I talk about all that in the first impressions video, so I'm not going to go over all that again. And but overall, it was fun. You know, it was really, really enjoyable. The light bloom and the sunwell and the, you know, the army of the light and everything. Like, it was a lot of fun. But now let us talk about the next zone, Zul'aman. Now, first and foremost, Zul'aman for many people is their favorite zone in Midnight so far. It was the zone that when I was streaming the game over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Nixxiom, by the way, if you guys ever want to come by and talk to me live. But when I was streaming, everyone was telling me, like, wait till you get to Zul'aman. You're going to love Zul'aman. Zul'aman is great. Let me just say, Zul'aman's great. Trolls are always a lot of fun in Warcraft lore. You know, I love their sort of cannibalistic, tribal, crazy, jungle, savage culture that we often get to see in World of Warcraft. And then you also get to see, like, the magnificent, like, side of troll culture with, like, their great pyramids and gold and stuff. Trolls are fascinating. Like, they're really cool as a race in WoW. They can either be the most savage, bloodthirsty, backwards barbarians, or they can be like these noble, incredible, like, inspiring, like, I love trolls. For me, I really liked Zul'aman for several reasons. Like, first of all, like, the callbacks to TBC were great. You know, obviously Zul'aman was originally introduced to the game in the Burning Crusade. We got a ton of lore surrounding the Blood Elves and the relationship to the Amani trolls up there. You know, that was always fun back in the day. You know, the Blood Elves and the Amani trolls have always had beef with each other for like generations. And we know from TBC that their relationship with the Loa is a little bit ruined, to say the least. And we got to see like a whole story of like the Amani people kind of, you know, coming back to their faith and coming back to like, you know, being a people recognized by their ancestral gods and stuff once more, you know, and kind of helping them, you know, go through that process. It was really cool. It was like there's something that's very prevalent all throughout Midnight. And I'm probably going to return to this topic a little later on in this rant, but Midnight has been like a very like spiritual expansion. Like, it really is exploring a lot of things in regards to spirituality and people's relationship to like their faith. And some things in Midnight I think were done very, very well. Some things, you know, I think were not done so well on that front. But like Zul'aman, I think was very solid. I really enjoyed, you know, following Zul'Jara. She was, you know, she's taking up the mantle of chieftain of her tribe, and she's having to, you know, go through this process of proving herself to the Loa and stuff again. Like, you know, it's just a really nice story. It was a really enjoyable story. And I like the fact that Blizzard didn't completely abandon like the tension and the conflicting relationship between the Amani and the Blood Elves. And her brother, Zul'Jar, I think his name was, Zul'Jar, right? You can correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong. But like, he kind of embodied like that old Amani spirit. Like, he's sort of like, you know, the Blood Elves are the Blood Elves are our enemies. We need to fight them. We need to use the light bloom in order to war against the Blood Elves and stuff. And we need to return the Amani to like the great empire that they used to be, because trolls used to just dominate Azeroth, and they can dominate Azeroth again. So he kind of has like that that old like warrior spirit, I suppose. But you know, and the contrast between the two was, I think it was fun. Some criticisms of the zone, like some things that I think were not so enjoyable for me and maybe for you guys too. I don't know. But the intro to the zone was a little bit weak. Like when I'm streaming over on Twitch, everybody kind of had the similar consensus that we kind of were just allowed into Zul'aman a little too quickly despite being outsiders. You know, the Blood Elf army kind of shows up at the gate. They're fighting back the Amani trolls that are using the Lightwood and stuff. And then suddenly the Amani are like, okay, like you can just come in and help us fight, you know, the Void and stuff. And, you know, we can just let you see like our ancient rituals and culture and stuff like that. I feel like the intro was a little fast. Like it didn't ruin the experience. Like, don't get me wrong, but like the intro was a little quick in how fast the trolls just let us in there and let us, you know, just be a part of like their culture and traditions and so on and so forth. The next thing too, it is of course a little bit weird seeing the trolls and the Blood Elves kind of being sort of friendly to each other through Lady Liadrin, despite the fact that the trolls and the Blood Elves have been killing each other for so damn long in the lore. It's kind of like that's just forgotten for the most part, or not forgotten, but it's just sort of, you know, you just kind of have that stereotypical like Blizzard thing going on with Liadrin and Zul'jara, where Liadrin goes out, you know, she's the Blood Elf paladin lady, for those that might not remember the name. You know, she goes in there and, you know, she and us, the player, you know, we're helping the trolls and we're learning about like their unique and cool culture and whatnot. And even like Liadrin makes a few comments at one point about like, oh, you know, maybe we were wrong to like, you know, judge these crazy savage like trolls and stuff. And there was so much about them that we did not know and blah, blah, blah. And maybe like we can work together for like a greater Azeroth. So, you know, it's Blizzard. This is a whole like other topic, but I won't go into this with this video, but it's Blizzard kind of shying away from like social conflict. So all like the racism and stuff that's existed between these two like different cultures, these two different peoples for so long, you know, it's just kind of like, you know, just Liadrin goes in like this one paladin and like suddenly the trolls are kind of, I guess, just more cool with outsiders or something. Granted, we never really saw like the opinion of the greater troll culture on outsiders in Zul'aman. We just kind of see Zul'jara being willing to work with us. So we'll kind of see where the story goes from there. Like, you know, are people going to follow Zul'jara with working with the Blood Elves against like Xal'atath and stuff? Are they going to rebel against her? You know, I guess we're going to have to find out and see where the story goes. But even that, I think, was like a little fastly written, I suppose, where Liadrin just suddenly, after like a couple hours in Zul'aman, suddenly she's just like, man, like what have we been doing killing these awesome people, you know, for like all these generations and stuff. The weakest thing though in the Zul'aman zone, at least in my opinion, don't know about you guys, but the weakest thing and the thing that I really didn't like I thought sucked, it had to do with Liadrin being in Zul'aman, and she is a paladin. The issue is that, okay, so there's this one quest in Zul'aman. Maybe you guys remember it. Maybe you guys are about to do it for the first time yourselves. But there is a quest in Zul'aman, it's very early on, where in order to please the Loa of the Amani tribe, what you need to do is you need to go and kill like 10 or 15 of these dudes, this like, you know, other race of people that the Amani are at war with that live in the mountains or whatever. And you need to go and kill these dudes and you need to cut their heads off. Okay, that's the quest. And you now have this bag of, you know, decapitated heads. And what you then do is go up to the temple of this bird Loa, and you need to put the severed heads in the nests of this bird Loa's children so that her children can eat the severed heads, you know, pluck out their eyes. And this is what pleases the Loa. Now, this is great. Like, I think this is awesome. You know, this is like kind of like old school paganism, you know, 101, like these very, these sacrificial rituals to like please the gods and stuff of, yesteryear and whatnot. That's great. The issue that I have though is Liadrin makes no comment about like this being weird or uncomfortable by it. She is a paladin. Like, I would think that she would, upon seeing this, because she's involved in this quest, it's not like she's like, gone or something. Upon seeing this, I would think that she would be like a little kind of wigged out by it. Like, oh, you know what I mean? Like imagine like if I invited you into my house and I'm like, oh, hey man, like before we eat dinner together, can we just like pray real fast? And you're like, okay, I guess we'll just pray real quick. And then like suddenly like I bring out some fucking animal and I cut its head off and I start pouring the blood all over my face while, calling out to like the old gods or something. You'd probably be a little weirded out by that, okay? Of course, everyone in the comment section is gonna be like, oh, based, like, oh, so cool. Like, no, like you'd probably be a little wigged out by that. You'd probably be a little bit uncomfortable, you know what I mean? And I wanted to see that more with Liadrin. I wanted to see her like being challenged a bit, like, okay, like I understand we kind of need to work with these guys, to maybe fight against Xal'atath and the Void and whatnot. But this is a very different people to like the people of Silvermoon. Like this is like some crazy stuff that they're doing for like their Loa gods and whatnot compared to what you would see like in Silvermoon with like its white or light worshippers and arcane users and stuff. This is very different. So I feel like Liadrin, like that should have been explored a little bit more, like her being a bit more like cautious about supporting these people and struggling with the culture that she's observing and the religion that she's observing. I think that would have made Liadrin and the whole story there a lot stronger if, when you spoke to her, she was saying things like, I don't know, man, I understand what we're trying to do here, but this is hard for me. Like, this is really hard for me to look past this stuff. I think that would have been great. So those are my thoughts on Zul'aman, but overall, really fun zone. Like, you don't take any of my criticisms as like, oh, like this was terrible, this was boring. Like, no, not at all. It was fun. The next zone is Harandar, or whatever. Herendar was the weakest zone out of all the zones. I think I'm not sharing anything new by saying that. I'm pretty sure that's kind of a consensus opinion. Herendar is just kind of boring as a zone. Even when I reached Herendar on stream, people were saying like, you're probably not going to like this zone. Like, no one really likes this zone. You're probably just going to want to speed through this one. And yeah, like it was kind of a weak zone. The only thing that was really like good about Herendar is there is this fan theory that exists that's very much supported by what you experience in the zone. But in the zone, the story that you learn is that the Herendar, like the people, they once lived on the surface and they heard the call of their goddess many, many years ago. And they descended deep into the world until they found the cradle. And like, this is where like the goddess, like she was, being cradled by like, these roots of like these trees and just deep under the ground, whatever. And then one day, apparently, like the goddess was ripped up out of the ground. And now like the Herendar, like they hear her voice or something. And long story short, without getting into like the full thing, there is this lore theory that proposes that the goddess that the Herendar are worshiping was actually Yasharaj. I think it was Yasharaj, right? The old god from like Mists of Pandaria that created like all the Shah and stuff. Because when you go to like the Rift of Aln and whatnot in Herendar, it is full of all these like Shah entities and whatnot, or like it's using like the Shah models. And like in the lore, Yasharaj is like ripped up out of Azeroth by the Titans and such. And so it's like there's like these parallels with the story of like the old god and also what we experience in Herendar with these people and their goddess that they worshipped and that they listened to, her whispers in their head and stuff like that. Again, very old goddish, like a direct whisper in your head telling you like what to do and where to go and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought that was interesting, but that's not a confirmed thing, so we'll see. But outside of that, like, Herendar was just kind of dull because, at least for me, when I went into Herendar, like, immediately I'm introduced to... Remember in my first impressions video that I did where I was talking about how one of the things that I wasn't really a big fan of with Eretor and his relationship to Turelion is that it is the embodiment of the trope that the child teaches the parent, the child teaches the elder, the youth teaches like the old, like what is morally good and morally correct and the right way of doing things. And tradition is bad and stuff. This is something that is just all over, you know, media nowadays. I mean, it's, you know, it's Hiccup in How to Train Your Dragon. Like, Dad, we shouldn't kill the dragons. Like, you know, they should be our friends, you know, and Dad's stubborn and he's like, no, you're wrong. And, you know, whatever. Like, it's just this trope. It's all over like kids movies nowadays because it makes kids feel smart and whatnot. Like, I know better than the adult does. And anyway, that was one of my big issues with the Eretor story. It can be done and it can be done well. I'm not trying to say like it's always bad, but, you know, it's just a very overused trope and Blizzard tends to do it a lot. And, we had that trope again in Herendar, but this time it's not the youth like conflicting with the parent, it's the youth conflicting with the elders. So we've got this girl and apparently she has left her society, which is very taboo in their culture. You're not supposed to do that. And she has left because she has heard the voice of the goddess, because the goddess speaks to her because she's so important apparently. And so she's like, well, the goddess told me to leave. And now she's come back to Herendar and there's a council of elders and they're like, we don't mess with outsiders. We're not supposed to be interacting with them. You shouldn't have left. And she, you know, kind of gives like, you know, her whole speeches of like, no, like, you know, our traditions are holding us back and, you know, we need to be, you know, open to the outside world. It's the trope again. It's twice in the same expansion. And like, we don't really spend a lot of time with her beforehand. Like, we don't spend much time with her. And so we don't really kind of, I suppose, like, get on her side. You know, she's just this, almost like this rebellious teenager who apparently hears the voice of God. And she knows better, apparently, than like the elders that have been communing with the goddess for however long or something. I don't know. So now the elders too, like they also are kind of, you know, not following tradition as they should. But again, you just kind of got that trope again. And they don't really establish at the end, like who is right and who is wrong. And it's most likely going to be the case that the elders were actually the ones that were correct, because if it's true that like, you know, the old gods or whatever are like influencing like the Heron or the Herenir or the Herendar or whatever, you know, and like even there's this prophecy, I don't remember, was it in Legion or somewhere, or maybe it was Battle for Azeroth, where it's like, oh, beware, like, you know, the woman with green eyes or something. And it's this girl, people are assuming, like, she's going to cause a lot of problems for Azeroth down the road. If that's all true, then the elders were right. The other thing, too, that I think was a little bit weak with Orwenna, like, she's the main girl that I've been talking about, like, the main, like, lead female character. Something else that I thought was a little bit weak with her, and I felt the same way in War Within when she was first introduced. This is a girl that has been raised in like this insanely isolated culture, like living deep, like underground, you know, among the roots of the world trees and stuff. An incredibly tribalistic, you know, culture. And for some reason, like, she doesn't embody this at all. Like, she's just cool with outsiders. Like, she's not xenophobic in the slightest. Like, she's not like prejudice like towards outsiders at all. And this is a little bit weird, you know, like it would have been cool with her as a character, unless I'm misremembering something from the War Within, to be fair, unless I'm misremembering, it would have been cool with her as a character that like, yeah, she's come to the surface and she's interacting with outsiders and stuff, but she's struggling with that. Like, she's struggling with trusting us. She's struggling with like, you know, the world above, I suppose. You know, she's struggling, like, even like the fact that she's like walking around like on the surface in the light of the sun and whatnot, you know, it kind of got some dark elf from D&D fantasy going on where she's like, oh man, like the light of the sun, it burns. Like, you know, I don't like being up here. Like, You know, I wish Blizzard would have kind of explored that a little bit more, because I think it would have made her character a lot, I suppose, richer if maybe, you know, we kind of taught her, like, you know, hey, like, we're not a group of people to be feared. You know, you can trust us and you can work with us. And I think we saw a little bit of that back in War Within, but I confess I don't fully remember. And so if I got that completely wrong, just dismiss what I said. But I wish I would have seen a little bit more of that in Midnight, because she just kind of, you know, just very quickly just trusts us and is like, okay, like, yeah, just come on down to like my homeland, or my elders are probably going to want to kill you, and because you're cool. And anyway, so Herendar was just a bit weak. I don't think Herendar is anybody's favorite zone. People are calling it Fern Gully. People are calling it Pandora. It's the only zone in the War Within where I didn't like the soundtrack, because you got like this like all-female choir going like ha 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 like all the time. It's just a little bit annoying. It's the only zone where I turned the music off. Visually, it looked cool. I wish it kind of looked more like a cave, considering it's underground. You know, it's all lit up and beautiful, and you know, it like has this, like, you know, if you look out at the edge of Herendar, it looks like this hole in the ground is like freaking huge. Like, oh my goodness, it's like the size of the world itself. Like, it's huge. Now let's move on to the next one, and that is Voidstorm. So Voidstorm, we kind of return back to the whole light versus void like philosophy conflict, where you have some characters are very pro light, and they're like, we can't trust the void in the slightest. And then we have characters that are kind of more like, oh, maybe we could work with the void, and the void could help us defeat Xal'atath. And you as like the player are kind of left a little bit in this sort of state of mind where it's like, it's almost like Blizzard's asking you, like, you know, how do you see the void and how do you see the light, you know, throughout the story in Voidstorm. So the primary like hostile force against the void in the Voidstorm is Lothraxion. He's the Light Dreadlord. He's one of like the leaders of the Army of the Light. He is 100% against the void in any way, shape, or form. You know, he doesn't trust the void. He's constantly talking about how, because like Alaria and Editor are not just insanely zealot against the void, this shows that they're blind, that they're naive. And yet Alaria, who is his friend, is someone corrupted by the void, but is fighting with him in the Army of the Light, like against, well, not with the Army of the Light, but alongside the Army of the Light, like against the void and the enemies of the light, I suppose. People are hypocrites. Like, everyone's a hypocrite. You know what I mean? Like Lothraxion, he's like, I'm 100% against the void, but Alaria, you're cool. You know what I mean? It's like the dude that you meet and he's like the most racist person you've ever met in your life, and he's got a black girlfriend. Happens all the fucking time. Everyone's a fucking hypocrite. That was interesting, I suppose. Like Lothraxion's relationship to Alaria, he's like the antagonist of the entire zone. In fact, the entire zone ends with the dungeon where you go and you kill him. Lothraxion just decides to do this crazy thing where he's gonna blow up this like way gate or whatever, and the resulting explosion is gonna destroy Silvermoon in our world, and we have to stop him and we have to kill him. And he's just like, oh, this just has to be done because there is no other alternative. So the zone kind of really focuses in again on the relationship between the light and the void, and it shows the dangers of just being blinded by faith, like blinded by your zealotry for what you believe in. And the one thing that I really enjoyed about the Voidstorm zone, it was the best part of the zone, hands down, is finally, at long freaking last, we know what Xal'atath is trying to do as a villain. Recently, I made a video here on Nixxiom Talks, and I talked about like Xal'atath as a villain and why so many people have not liked Xal'atath as a villain over all these years. Xal'atath has been in World of Warcraft for 10 years, and we know nothing about her and what she's trying to do. We know nothing. And I compared her to like Garrosh Hellscream, who was only in Warcraft as like a boss and like a character we interacted with for like 8 years, I believe it was. And I spent 25 minutes talking about like Garrosh and his story and all like the different layers of it. And I went over Xal'atath's story in less than 2 minutes because there's nothing to say at all. And this is one of the reasons why many people just don't like Xal'atath. We don't know what she wants. We don't know what she's trying to do. We know that she's trying to get the Titan world, Soul of Azeroth, but why? For what purpose? What is she trying to do? Well, in the Voidstorm, they finally reveal what she's trying to do. Her plan. Now, this might be wrong, because maybe this is something that she told, the Dominar and whatnot, and she might be just lying. But her plan, allegedly, is just to destroy everything. Like, she just wants to turn the world into a great yawning Ganunga gap. Like, which just means, like, return creation to, like, just nothingness. It's just a big, empty void of darkness and nothingness. And, the Dominar guy that we work with, he just talks about, like, how boring that would be. Like, if just all of creation was just destroyed and all that was left was darkness. And that's one of the reasons why he decides to help us, because he enjoys the conflict in creation and he doesn't want Xal'atath to put an end to it. So that all said, the reason why this was cool is that now we finally know what Xal'atath wants, and we kind of understand a bit more of like who she is, like in her philosophy. Xal'atath is just the devil. The devil, Satan, he's not pro anything. He's just anti everything. Creation itself offends him. Everything in creation pisses him off. And his whole goal is like he doesn't have the power to destroy what God created. So what he does is he just corrupts what God created. He just ruins it. He destroys the image and decays it. But Xal'atath, she is actually trying to get the power to destroy everything, apparently, and just return everything to just nothingness. And so, cool. So she's just the devil. Like, she is just pure, it's just a pure, straight force of evil in the world. Fantastic. And we have like these sort of lesser evils that exist underneath her. And personally, I think this is good. Fine. Have your like, agent of pure evil and darkness that's trying to undo reality itself. Great. That's awesome. And like, beneath, like, even like the old gods would be beneath Xal'atath, because like even they want something to rule over. Xal'atath just wants pretty much nothing. Working with like the light against the void and whatnot, that's cool as well. But there are some people like, I saw some posts on like Twitter and whatnot, or X, of people saying that like the Voidstorm and like this whole expansion has like a lot of very like anti-Christian propaganda in it, because it's just depicting people that follow the light as being just insane zealots that just, whatever, like they can't listen to reason and like so on and so forth. I would disagree with this personally, because going back to my first impressions video where I talked about the light, I mean, the light is not a deity. The light is not truth. The light is not like bound by any sort of objectiveness, so the light is just a magic system, and you can use the light, whether you're a good guy or a bad guy, whether you're Erator or the Scarlet Crusade, you can use it because the light doesn't actually have a will, and it doesn't have any sort of like objective standard like behind it that makes it so that, like theologically, you cannot use God to do evil. That's impossible. That's a logical contradiction. It's like a triangle of four sides. That makes no sense. If somebody like, if a Christian does something evil, whatever it is, a Christian kills like someone, they didn't do it because they were a Christian. They did it in spite of being a Christian. And the light as well in Warcraft, it has no relationship to God whatsoever. Like, again, the light is not bound by anything objective. It's not bound by any sort of truth or whatever, and God in, real theology, like God is objectivity itself. God is the source and summit of all truth. Therefore, God by definition is objective in his nature, and any movement towards what is objectively true is by definition a movement towards God. And this is why God gave us reason, because it is through reason that we learn who God is and we draw closer to him. And God enlightens reason through grace. Anyway, World of Warcraft ain't doing that with the light. Not to go on a big like theology or like philosophy like lecture, you know, of Thomas Aquinas or something. The light is not God. You know what I mean? Now, maybe to some like, you know, Reddit browsing, you know, drooling atheist, you know, they think the light in World of Warcraft is supposed to be God, but it's not. It's just a form of magic. So I would disagree. It's not anti-Christian propaganda. The Voidstorm is not anti-Christian propaganda in its story. It's just zealot people that are really obsessed with their particular color of magic, being like, my color of magic is cooler than your color of magic, and they're fighting and conflicting over it, and so on and so forth. But overall, Voidstorm I thought it was fun, fighting the Naru and stuff, and seeing Lothraxian's reaction to the Naru being blown up. Like, that was great. Overall, I think the level up experience from 80 to 90 in Midnight, it was very enjoyable, at least for me, except for Herendar. You know, I'm going to be leveling up alts here soon, and I admit I'm not looking forward to going through that zone again. I think the best zone was Quel'Thalas. Hands down, it was the best, at least in my opinion. Zul'aman would be second, Voidstorm is third, and Herendar would be fourth, at least in my ranking. I love how solid and how much better Blizzard has gotten with their storytelling over the years with each new expansion. I loved the fact there were so many moments, you know, while just playing through like the quest line where you could just interact with the NPCs and you could choose to stay a while and listen and just, you know, hear them argue with each other, hear them debate over, you know, what is the right course of action. I loved those moments. Tons of voice acting, really bringing the world to life. There were even plenty of moments, like while I was playing Midnight, where I was like, whoa, like I'm really immersed into this, really into this story and stuff. And of course the gameplay, you know, is solid. You know, I don't really have any complaints as a balanced druid, bro. I'm just blowing everything up as this guy. You know, I'll be doing heroics soon, doing the prey system a bit more. I've already gotten to play around with prey for a little bit, leveling up my professions and such, and doing the mythics, gonna do some raids, and it's gonna be fun. So I'll make a video here in a little while, just talking about the end game and what I think, and then I'll probably, like, in that video, that'll probably be like my review of Midnight, because I know there's a lot of you that are probably, you're watching this video and you're like, you're hesitant to buy Midnight because you know it and I know it and we all know it. Like, of course the expansion's good, like in the beginning, you know, the quests and the story and so on and so forth. But, you know, you want to wait like a month, you know, wait 2 months to see, you know, what are the cracks in the system, because that has certainly happened many times with WoW expansions in the past. You know, like they come out and everyone loves it. You know, Shadowlands, like, oh, this is great, this is awesome. And then, oh, you know, everything goes south. And Warlords of Draenor, like, oh, this is great. Oh, and everything goes south. So, you know, I'm saving my review until like I've gotten to like experience the end game a bit more. And, you know, and I get to kind of see like, you know, what do people think? What do I think? Like, what have people found or seen that maybe I missed? I don't know. But so far, Midnight's been really enjoyable. Like, it's been a lot of fun. Playing the dungeons on this character, PvPing, leveling up in the world, it's been fun. So it's actually actively taken me away from my TBC, like, gameplay. And I didn't think Midnight was going to do that. Like, I thought I was going to balance both, but Midnight's, whenever I am able to, you know, play WoW, whenever my daughter, who's almost 10 months old now, whenever she gives me permission to play WoW, like, I'm always reaching for Midnight first right now. So that's good. You know, it's really, really good. Anyway, I think that's it, everybody. That's my ramble for this evening. I hope you all enjoyed it. Come watch me live on twitch.tv/Nixxiom if you want. I recently got back into streaming, so it's been really fun hanging out with you guys on the Zygor streams and the Midnight streams. Like, it's been good, guys. You know, I really appreciate you all that are there. Other than that, you know, if you're not subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button, and, you know, I'll rant more about Midnight in the future. I got some other things I want to talk about, though, and, yeah, guys, I guess that's it. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you with my next video.